Okay. Hi, my name is Amanda Fields. I'm your RCAW Executive Director here today with Luis Villalva, who has been with the Department of Labor and Industries for over 4 years and has gained experience in both construction and general industries. We also have with us Jessica Wilke, Safety and Health Specialist for the Division of Occupational Safety and Health, with over 20 years of experience with federal and state compliance activities. Luis and Jessica, please take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us and giving us the opportunity to go over some of these fall protection updates. What we want to get started is just there was some updates that happened in November, and when we're doing some of our inspections, we're still seeing a couple of the requirements not being met. So we wanted to go over that at this time. I will share my screen real quick. And so I wanted to do a brief overview of what the Department of Labor and Industries does on top of doing the workplace safety and health inspections. We do contractor licensing, workers' rights and youth employment, workers' compensation, insurance claims, crime victim claims, and support for small businesses. We'll touch on that last piece towards the end of the slide, and we'll have some of our information so you can reach out for these services. Today we wanted to talk about when the fall protection is required, the types of fall hazards that we commonly see when we go out and do these inspections, and the WAC requirements that are required that updated in November, as well as the existing ones. So a bit of a refresher with the updates. Touch on some of the fall protection methods and systems and a few of the key requirements for some of those fall protection methods and systems and things you would want to look for whenever you're out at your work sites. And common violations that we see in roofing work and construction in general. And like I said, we'll go over some of the consultation services, and I have a few resources for you to use whenever you go back to your employers or to your employees and want to present this information. With that being said, I will go ahead and give it away to Jessica.
Hello, I'm Jessica Wilke. I also want to put out there that we are going to ask if you can hold any questions that you have until the end. Write them down, jot them down. We could put them in the chat and cover them, but just to get through this material, we have quite a bit of material to go through, and then we will open it up for some questions at the end there. Okay, so when is fall protection required? Falls can occur at any level. So there are 4 trigger heights that are mentioned in the WAC code, and the WAC code is the Washington Administrative Code. It's the chapter 296 covers labor and industry, and then there are several chapters within that that cover the different occupational standards. So to break things down and keep it simple today, we're going to have hazards that are triggered at 0 feet or regardless of height, 4 feet, 6 feet, and 10 feet. This, I'm not going to read through all of it. It's more for your reference that you can come back to, like a little cheat sheet about the trigger heights, where you can find the code on our website, lni.wa.gov, and find a safety rule. But these are a little breakdown of what the hazard is and where those requirements can be found. So we'll start with hazards of 0 feet or regardless of height, slips, trips, impalements. This is a pretty cluttered job site. There's no real clear walking path, and somebody could trip over, these 2x4s or whatever's on the ground. And if you see the rebar in there, that's an impalement hazard. So keeping the site clean, keeping clear walking paths, and then making sure that rebar is protected. And that's something that's typically not going to be the roofer's responsibility, but your workers are still being exposed to it when they're up on the roof and it's down below. So talking to the general contractor, say, hey, we noticed this hazard. Can somebody correct this before our folks get up on the roof? Around dangerous equipment, 0 feet the walkways, platforms around any kind of dangerous equipment. They mentioned degreasing tanks and pickling tanks and that thing. Not going to see a lot of that in roofing, but is one of the requirements. So holes are defined as a gap or void that's 2 inches or more in its least dimension in a floor, a roof, or other surface. So depending on the height that person could fall, there's going to be different sets of requirements for protection. So at 0 feet, like this guy stepping through the floor, any hole that can be stepped into or through, or that can trip a person, it's got to be covered by a standard cover, so or a guardrail system around that. And then if the hole has a fall distance of 4 feet or more, like the skylight down below, that you can use a guardrail system, a standard cover, a warning line, but the warning line needs to be 15 feet from all open sides of that hole. So that's not going to be a great option for roofers, or a personal fall arrest or restraint system. So a little more on skylights. Don't assume that those skylights are going to be capable of withstanding your body weight or the impact of a fall. They've got to be guarded by a cover or a standard guardrail system on all of the sides, or your employees have to be protected by a fall arrest or fall restraint. So these are actual scenes of fatalities that have been investigated. On the left there, workers sat on that skylight, didn't hold, and unfortunately he fell and died there. In the middle, we have what looks like a normal skylight installed on the roof, but what nobody knew was that it wasn't installed. It was just sitting there covering the skylight hole. And that was something that had been set up by framers, different contractors on the site. Well, we also have roofers working up there, and they didn't know any better. One of the roofers was asked to move that skylight, and he had no idea that there was a hole underneath. He fell through that hole 45 feet. You can see the aerial view of that hole, so that I couldn't tell which one of those would have a hole underneath it. I don't think anybody else can. So I wouldn't want to play roulette like that. But that's a good reminder of different contractors on the site can be creating hazards, and your workers are still exposed to those hazards. So being aware of that. And fall heights from 4 feet, open-sided walking working surfaces. That can be balconies, decks, a roof, stairs. Several things fall under that walking working surface. But they've got to be protected by a standard guardrail system, a personal fall restraint or personal fall arrest system, a safety net, a catch platform. We don't see those very often. There's one over there on the far right, or a warning line system. And often we see those warning lines not set up correctly. So we'll cover that later on, how to set your warning line up within compliance. Stairs that are having more than 4 risers or 30 inches above where they could fall, you've got to have at least 1 handrail and 1 stair rail system. So this we see a lot too, where framers have come through on a new piece of construction. There's no handrail up there, and maybe the roofing folks are going up through the house, and then your workers are exposed to that hazard. So just things to be aware of that you didn't cause, but there's still exposure to your folks to get hurt. Ramps, runways, and inclined walkways, they have to be equipped with, well, if they are over 4 feet or more, then they've got to be equipped with a standard guardrail on each open side. They can't be inclined more than 20 degrees from the horizontal, and have cleats so that you can prevent slipping, and be at least 18 inches wide. On the left in that photo there, we don't know how deep that hole is, but it looks like it's at least 4 feet to me. So that should have guardrails around it. On the far right, you've got what looks like a chicken ladder. I have no idea what that, what the angle on that is, but not acceptable. And then a nice little cheat sheet there in the middle that shows, proper angles for ladders, fixed and step ladders, stairs, handrails, and also ramps there. Openings, typically going to be a window or a door on a floor, second floor we see or above. That definition is an opening that's at least 30 inches high and 18 inches wide, and it's less than 39 inches from the floor and has a drop of more than 4 feet on the other side. So you can see the inside and the outside of this window where they put the guardrail up. Fall hazards on a roof specifically. So roofers group, you're going to know the difference between a steep pitch and a low pitch, but if you have new employees coming in, this might be a handy graphic to show. Get used to looking at that 4 and 12 and be able to pick it out from just looking at the house. The fall distance that's going to be measured by compliance officers or consultants there is going to depend on where the exposure is. So is the employee working up on the ridge at that 16-foot level, or are they working in the middle of the roof where they might slide and fall off that 9-foot eave? That's what your offices are going to be looking and how they get those measurements. Working on a low pitched roof. So here is the big change. Or I'm sorry, this is not roofing work. This is any kind of work other than roofing work or constructing a leading edge. So putting in skylights, cleaning the roof, HVAC work, they're all going to have a trigger height of 4 feet. And they've got to use fall restraint, fall arrest, a positioning device, warning light system, guardrail, or a safety watch, which is not going to apply in roofing work. So don't worry about that one too much. Here's the big one. Steep pitch roof. We see this. This is the #1 citation that's written for roofers, is being on a steep pitch or hazardous slope without any fall protection. So regardless of what the work activity, this doesn't just apply to roofers or anyone else, whatever the work activity is, you got to have a fall restraint system. You can't use a monitor or warning lines or a fall arrest or positioning device. And a hazardous slope is when your footing can't be maintained without special devices. So if it's icy, it's windy, just the surface material can be slippery. That you've either got to use a fall restraint or positioning device system. Can't even use arrest on those surfaces. All right, so here's the 6 feet rule for when you're performing roofing work on a low pitched roof or constructing a leading edge. Now, you might remember this being called the 10-foot rule because it used to be that 10 foot was the trigger height, and that changed recently back in November to 6 feet. So if you've got roofing work to do, you've got to have a protection system anytime you are at the max above 6 feet. So no more 10-foot exception there. If the employee is not directly involved in roofing work or constructing the leading edge, they have to be protected at 4 feet. They don't get that 6-foot exemption. The exemption to the fall protection rule, everybody's got to go up and install fall protection. So you're exempt during that initial putting in the anchor and setting up the system before or after work has been done. So no work can be going on at that time. Just go up, install it, get protected, and get to work. Or if you're inspecting, investigating a roof that's a low pitch prior to the start of work or after work has been completed. So if these two gentlemen were working on the same roof, that exemption wouldn't apply to them either. That exemption doesn't apply on steep pitch roofs where construction is underway or where there's a fall protection system that's already been installed and it's available for use, then you need to use it. The department does not consider inspecting or estimating, delivering, staging, or storing materials on the roof, or somebody that would be estimating or inspecting on a roof that's a hazardous slope. So this one on the right, it might be water, it might be ice, not entirely sure, but it could be, looks like a slippery surface, potential for that. So that would not be exempt either. All hazards at 10 feet. Now this only applies to placing structural members or excavating and trenching operations. There's a lot of information on this slide, but the next slide will cover this a little bit better for your purposes. When you're determining if you met that 6-foot or 10-foot threshold, you're looking at what's the actual distance that from the worker support level to where the fall would stop. So this gentleman on the left, he's maybe maybe setting trusses. He might be at 9 feet, 10 feet, but he needs some method of protection if it's over 10 feet. On the far right, we have an actual fatal fall scene where they were constructing a leading edge in this garage, about 4 feet high. The worker didn't have any protection, so he fell and unfortunately died from a 14-foot fall. If you look at this graphic in the middle, if your anchor point is at foot level, so that's where your worker support is, and you've got a 6-foot lanyard on, you've got a 3.5-foot shock absorber on, they may not protect you at a fall that's under 15 feet. So even if this gentleman had been wearing fall arrest system, he wouldn't have been saved. So fall restraint might be a much better option in that, where you can't even fall over the edge. You're kept from physically going over. Here's some common WAC codes that are in construction. This is not an exhaustive list. So we have the chapter on construction, which covers PPE, rigging and material handling, motorized vehicles, personnel lifting, several things under that chapter. Then unified fall protection, that's one you want to get really familiar with because it applies to general industry, construction. Just about everything falls under that unified fall protection rule now. Ladders are going to apply. Occupational health standards that include asbestos work if you're doing that, wildfire smoke exposure, and outdoor heat exposure. That wildfire smoke is potentially going to become a permanent rule this summer, this season. Hasn't been finalized yet, but we expect it to be so. Portable tools, machine guarding, and powered industrial trucks and lifts, scaffolds, record keeping. You can see these are all chapters, so they've all got several sections underneath with requirements. So it's a lot to take in. That's why we're going to push our consultation services at the end to help you get into a good shape and make sure that you're following compliance as well as you can. And back to Louise.
Thank you, Jessica. So we went over some of the hazards and the requirements. I want to go over the fall protection systems specifically. And this is just a quick refresh of some of the controls. There's 3 different types that you will use: the fall restraint, positioning device, and fall arrest. We'll go over more examples. So some of the examples of the fall restraint, which we're going to go over first, is guardrail systems, fall restraint systems, warning line systems, and the warning line system and safety monitor. The fall restraint system, it keeps a worker from reaching a fall point before the fall occurs. And some of the types, like I said, is a standard guardrail system, safety harness, the warning line, and the warning line and safety monitor. I wanted to take time to go over some of the things that we look for, because it's what we commonly see when we're out there inspecting where the requirements are not being met. This is an information dense slide, but we are going to provide the slideshow at the end so it can get emailed out and it will be available for your review. So you will get to see this at a later point, just in case you're worried that I'm going over it a little too fast for the sake of time. Guardrail systems, one of the common things we see is not having all of the 3 components. The top rails and the intermediate rails. What I've seen mostly is the toe boards not being there, and the guardrail system not being high enough, which is 39 to 45 inches. And whenever you're setting up your guardrail systems, just be sure to make sure that you're not creating another hazard. You don't want the intermediate rail to extend beyond the end of the guardrail system, and the guardrail systems that are constructed, you don't want them to have any catch or cut hazards. So the guardrails, a lot of the times we'll see the guardrails used, is a good time to use them, is the ramps and runways, working surfaces with unprotected sides or edges, such as the top floor on the left, and opening and holes, just like Jessica had an example of that fatality with the skylight. If you're going to use guardrails or holes, there's requirements for that, you want it to be strong enough for supporting twice the weight of the employees, equipment, and materials all added together. It has to be secured so it doesn't get displaced by any weather, equipment, or employees. And you need to have it marked where your employees will recognize it, whole or cover or color coded. Just as long as your employees are going to know that there is a fall hazard underneath that cover. The safety harnesses, so now that we've went over some of the fall restraints that are not PPE related, I'm going to go into some of the PPE related. So with the safety harnesses as fall restraint, the anchorage points that are going to be used, you want to make sure that they're able to support 4 times the intended load, and the harnesses and lanyard hardware must be able to withstand a tensile load of 4,000 pounds. And the restraint system, as opposed to the fall arrest, is intended for the worker to go up to the sides and the edges of the working surface without them falling. It's one of the problems that we can see that we often see where fall restraint is used is at the corners of the roof, because you'll have enough slack to go to the corner of the roof, but in turn you'll have too much and you could fall off either side. As part of the safety harness, some of the devices that we'll have are rope grab devices. These are commonly seen for fall arrest and as opposed to fall restraint, unless the manufacturer specifically states that this is used for fall restraint. The rope grab devices are not to be used for fall restraint. Warning line systems. So this is one that we see often when we're doing our inspections, and there's often several different requirements that we go through and they're not met. One of the biggest ones is keeping the employees outside the boundaries of the warning lines unless it's protected by an additional fall protection system. So the warning line systems can be used on flat or low pitch roofs and surfaces for 12 SOAP or less during roofing, constructing a leading edge, or activities other than roofing. A couple of the requirements for this that we're going to go through. So if you can use a rope, wire, or chain, it has to have a tensile strength of 500 pounds after being attached to the stanchions. Or in place of the rope, you can use highly visible caution or danger tape. However, it also has to be 3 inches wide by 3 millimeters thick and has to have a tensile strength of at least 200 pounds. The rope, wire, or chain, if you choose to use that, you have to have a highly visible material, flags spaced out every 6 feet, such as the yellow flags in this diagram. And after the warning line system is installed, the stanchions must be able to resist tipping over with a force of at least 16 pounds at 30 inches. And the rope, wire, or chain has to be rigged and supported in such a way that it doesn't go below 36 inches and doesn't go beyond 45 inches. So if it slouches, just ensure that it's not going below 36 inches to the ground. And of course, the stanchions, you want to make sure that they're attached in such a way that they're not going to be tipped over. One of the things we commonly see as well is point of access for the warning line systems. Either the access doesn't exist and it's needed for materials handling to create a clear path, or if there is a point of access, it's often not closed off whenever it's not in use. So when workers must perform tasks outside the edge of the warning line, we do have to use another fall protection system or a safety monitor system. And if the safety monitor system is used, it has to be addressed in the fall protection work plan, which is required at 10 feet or more. If you're using the safety monitor systems, Workers who are doing the work outside of the line that are not the safety monitor have to be easily distinguishable, and they have to be able to hear the instructions and warnings from the safety monitor, so they can't have like headphones on. And the safety monitor has to be close enough so that they can hear them. The requirements for the safety monitors, they have to be trained, they have to be competent in that they have the authority to stop the activities if it gets too hazardous. And again, they have to be distinguishable from the members of the work crew. If you have a safety monitor, they cannot have any other duties other than monitoring the employees, and it's an 8-to-1 ratio. So no more than 8 employees for that safety monitor. Now we're going to go into fall arrest systems. Types of fall arrest systems include safety net, catch platform, and personal fall arrest system. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go over safety net in too much detail. There's a PowerPoint that we do have going over safety nets that is pretty long just because there's so many requirements with the safety nets. If that's something you're interested in getting more information on, you can contact me after this presentation and we can go over that. But the first one I want to go over is catch platforms, because these are ones that we have seen when we're doing the inspections and the consultations. One thing to remember, if a catch platform is used, it has to be installed within 4 vertical feet of the work area. And here's a diagram to show an example. So only the fall distance can be 4 feet. It has to be, once the edge of the roof is there, it has to be 4 feet below. And each catch platform has to have a guardrail system in place that meets the standard guardrail system requirements. And they also have to meet the strength and stability requirements of supported scaffolds. And now we're going back into PPE, which is personal fall arrest systems, the full body harness. They typically consist of the anchorage, the lanyard, the connectors, the snap hook, carabiner or D-ring, and the full body harness. So the fall arrest system differs from the fall restraint in that you can still fall with the personal fall arrest system, but the fall will be arrested, preventing the worker from hitting the ground. When you're performing your work, you want to keep in mind which fall systems you want to use. Depending on the distance, which we'll go over later on, if it's not a large enough fall or distance from the working surface, you might want to stick with fall restraint, such as the guardrails or the warning line, because fall arrest could become useless at a certain point, and there's a calculation that we'll go over later. One thing to keep in mind, this isn't something we've seen common, however, it does happen when employees bring PPE themselves, is we've seen body belts being used as opposed to a full body harness. That's not allowed. If a fall were to occur, it puts too much force on the midsection and could injure a worker. So you want to ensure that the full body harness has the 6 points of contact. Then remember the following when using the full body harness. The attachment point has to be located about the shoulder level or above the head, and recreational climbing harnesses are not to be used. The harnesses will have system deceleration devices. These can be shock absorbing lanyards, self-retracting lanyards or lifelines, and rope grab. The lanyards have to have a tensile strength of 5,000 pounds if they're used for fall arrest. The rope grab devices, they're going to have their own requirements, and again, these are for fall arrest systems unless they're specifically stated for restraint. But the rope grab will automatically lock if the worker was to fall. And we see self-retracting lanyards as well, and I'm going to go over some of the requirements for each of these. These will be, the rope grabs will be attached to the lifelines. We see two types of lifelines, the vertical or the horizontal. The vertical lifeline is secured to an upper anchorage. The one thing you want to keep in mind if you are using a vertical lifeline is that the fall distance can actually increase during a swing fall. So however the employee is going to fall, if a fall were to happen, you want to keep that in mind, because we want to be mindful of pendulum motion. We don't want them to swing whenever they do fall and strike an object or lower level before the arrest actually happens. And here are some of the requirements for the vertical lifelines. Only one worker can be attached to any one vertical lifeline. We have seen multiple people attached to a vertical lifeline with the rope grabs. That's not okay. It's very unsafe. It has to have a minimum breaking strength of 5,000 pounds. And if it limits the free fall distance to 2 feet or less, a breaking strength of 3,000 pounds minimum. If it's 6 feet or less, a breaking strength of 5,000 pounds minimum. And if the pendulum swings are an issue that could come up if you want to use a lifeline, the horizontal lifelines are what we commonly see to control those pendulum swings. One thing to keep in mind with the lifelines is when you do inspect them for damage, make sure that there's no knots tied into the lifeline, because it can reduce the strength by 50% or more. And whenever the lifelines are used, you want to make sure that they're not coming in contact with any chemicals that could damage them while they're being used, or they're going to run over rough or sharp surfaces. And this is the calculation I was talking about for fall arrest. Whenever you're using fall arrest, you want to take into consideration the distance that they're going to fall. You need to add the deceleration distance and the elongation of the harness, which depends on the deceleration device. You want to take into consideration the worker height, how tall the worker is, because they could still hit even after all these calculations. And then you want to take into consideration a safety factor, a margin of error of 1 to 2 feet. So with this example, the calculated clearance would be 16.5 to 17.5 feet, which if you're working anywhere under that, the fall arrest system is not going to be useful, and fall restraint may be a better option. And I'm going to give it back over to, I have some tools. So I know that was a lot of information to go over. We do have some tools that break some of this information down. For the sake of time, I will let Jessica go into her next slides, and if we have time, I will go back into using these. These are very useful. The handout is a handout you can order. I can show you how to order that, and the e-tool is something you can pull up on your phone and go through the requirements based on the work process being done. All right.
Thank you. All right, here's the fun part. So the top 10 violations in roofing work. I had a question in the chat about consultations and advice that we could give to roofers. And so this is going to cover 90% of the citations that we write are for these top 10 violations. So if you can take this advice, take these top 10 and make sure that you're in good shape with them, then you are going to be in fantastic shape if a compliance officer stops by. And if you would like to set up a consultation, so you have a job coming up and you want to take a look at this, you felt like this is a ton of information, can somebody from L&I come out and give me a consult on site and let me know if there's anything that we can correct? Absolutely, that's what we're here for. All right, number one most common roofing violation is no fall protection on a steep pitch roof. So for a steep pitch roof, regardless of what kind of work's happening, you got to have fall restraint system. a personal fall arrest system, or a positioning device system set up. And so these 3 pictures that we have around on the slide, something's wrong in all of these pictures. On the far left, he doesn't have any system at all. And that looks to me like it's going to be a steep roof. It's taken from an aerial view, but it looks like it's definitely 4 feet above. The eave is at least 4 feet from the ground. So top right corner, this is something we see all the time. It's too much slack in the lifeline. So if he does slip and fall over that eave, that rope's going to stretch out. He may trigger his deceleration pack that's also on him. So he's definitely going to hit that surface below the patio cover, if not the ground below that, because that's quite a bit of extra slack that he's got to go over the edge. So if you're going to be training folks that are working for you, I recommend, throw that line off of the roof, watch it go over the edge and see how far it goes down. Then add your height to that, add another 3.5 to 4 feet for your deceleration pack, and then add another 2 feet for your safety factor, and see, are you willing to make it that close? Then this picture below is this gentleman's wearing what appears to be a body belt or a recreational harness. And so those are not acceptable for working in Washington. Number 2 most common is fall protection while roofing on a low pitch roof, formerly known as the 10-foot rule. Now it's going to be 6-foot rule. If we can make you remember anything from this presentation, it's that, but this is a huge change. So no more roofing work at 10 feet with no fall protection. You've got to have that 6 foot applies if you're only doing roofing work on a low pitch and constructing a leading edge. So these folks in these pictures, you've got one guy outside of the warning line. I can't distinguish anybody that looks like a monitor. They're kind of all wearing similar outfits. So this is where we run into, usually somebody has made an attempt to set something up, a warning line or a safety monitor system, but they're not doing it correctly. And if it's not set up correctly, then it's not going to protect you. So that would be a violation, that there's no fall protection, even though you made an attempt. If it's not set up correctly, it's not going to serve its purpose. Number 3, no first aid certified crew member. So if you've got 2 people working on a site, 2 or more, that one of them needs to have a valid first aid certificate, and that expires about every 2 years, but you can get those renewed pretty easily. The code says that it's got to be a crew leader, supervisors that are the ones that hold it. I'm pretty lenient, so as long as I see one person on the site that's got it, I'm happy with that. But the rule is that the crew leaders and supervisors have got to have it. Number 4 is unsafe ladder setup or use. Getting off and on ladders at upper levels, you want to make sure that your ladder comes up 3 feet above the surface, the landing surface, if the ladder permits. So this is one that's often understood incorrectly. So if your ladder is long enough, then we want to see 3 rungs up in the air, so they have something to grab onto to get off and onto that ladder. If your ladder's not long enough, then you've got to do all 3 of these below, which is secure the ladder to the top at a rigid support. That doesn't include the gutter. Provide a grasping device such as a grab rail. The orange device that this gentleman's got on his ladder, I know they're available. I've personally never seen one in the field, but they are out there and available if you don't want to get a longer ladder. And then you've got to make sure that the ladder deflection alone would not cause it to slip off of its support. Additionally, with number 4, more ladder violations, climbing and descending, you have employees use at least one hand to grasp the ladder while they're climbing and descending. And another big one is you make sure that no employee carries an object or load that could cause them to lose their balance and fall while climbing up or down the ladder. So the solar panel, that rule is a little subjective. Some people have better balance than others. That solar panel is big enough that I would say that could cause just about anybody to lose their balance while they're climbing up and down. And then the picture on the right there, that's not a ladder. It's a device for material handling. So kind of cool thing that you can put your materials on and then just elevator right up to the roof surface where somebody can grab, save a lot of back pain. Other frequently cited ladder violations is self-supporting ladder used as a single ladder or in a partially closed position. You can see that on the top right. Then he's also standing on the top step. We also see standing on the top cap. Ladders not being inspected, and if they're inspected and they have defects, you know, if a non-slip foot is missing or there's a bent rail or something that they haven't been tagged and removed from service. So they're identified for the next person that comes along can see, all right, this is not a good ladder. I'm not taking this out in the field with me. And not training on ladder hazards. If your employees are using ladders, that's something that you include in your initial training, and you can include that in your accident prevention program. Number 5 is no fall protection work plan. So anytime there's work happening over 10 feet, you've got to have a written fall protection work plan in place unless they're fully protected by a guardrail system. So for your roofing work, probably going to be using these quite often. We have them available on our website. You've got to meet all the criteria of this A through G, and this will be in your slides that you can take to reference back to. So I won't cover all of them, but this is what the one from our website looks like. It's available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Ukrainian. And often what we see is somebody has printed this out and used it at the site. They might fill in some of the information, but almost always we see they're going to use fall arrest. And really what they have set up is a poor warning line system or a safety monitor system is what they're trying to use. So they haven't filled it out correctly. And it's not addressing all the fall hazards. And then the whole bottom where they describe the procedures, that's not been filled out. So that's what we see most often. And you'll be cited for not having a fall protection work plan or not implementing it if it's filled out incorrectly, doesn't match what the setup on the job site is, or just hasn't been filled out completely. So there's a couple of links there for you for competent person evaluation. So you can help determine who's going to be my competent person that I feel like I trust they know what they're doing. They can train people, and then they can correct the situation on site when I'm not there. If something's wrong, they have the authority that they can shut that down and correct it. And also a little training on responding to emergencies. So if somebody does fall and they've got that suspension trauma, is no fun. So calling 911 is not an appropriate response on how you're going to respond to somebody or rescue somebody who's had a fall. That gives you some, that link will give you some tips, but maybe having a ladder on site where you can at least, sorry, I jumped ahead too much, where you can let them climb onto that ladder and relieve some of that tension while you're waiting for first responders to come and get them the rest of the way down. Number 6, no walk around safety inspections. So at the beginning of every job and at least weekly thereafter, you conduct a walk around safety inspection with a member of management and one employee. Walk around the site, look for hazards, and document these. And you've got to keep that record until the completion of the job. It's got to be available for L&I personnel who are coming to check that out and make sure it's been done. So and when you're doing these walk around inspections, look for stuff that may have been caused by other contractors on the site. So you didn't create it, but you're aware of the hazard. There's a big open trench. There's some goofball climbing around on scaffolding. Somebody didn't clean up nails that could snag your folks. So being aware of those things, jotting them down that yes, we did this, we talked about it. The second portion of that is your crew safety meetings. Those aren't being held or they're not being documented. So you've got to have one of those at the beginning of every job and at least weekly after. And a lot of times roofers jobs aren't a week, so they are required to every job site. You know, some people have job sites that are jobs that take less than a day. And so if you are going to 2 sites in a day, then you got to have 2 walk around safety inspections for one for each site, and documenting those separately and then talking about it with your crew. So you have the crew meeting, you have everybody sign, this is what we talked about, put the date on it, put in a file for L&I, then your safety meetings and your walk around inspections are both documented for reference. You can have those meetings with the general contractor if that's okay with them, but they may not cover all the items that you need to be covering. So I recommend having your own, tailoring it to your folks, but you do have that option. No written safety program, what we call the accident prevention program, very common. You can call it a safety manual, whatever you want, but you're going over basically your safety policy, your orientation, what kind of on-the-job training folks are going to get, how do they take care of their PPE, who do they report an injury or illness to, if there's a hazard, who do they talk to about that, where first aid kits are, and what their emergency plan is. So it's very specific to your operation. And we have these available on our website, templates, but you can't just download it and call it yours. So they're very comprehensive on our website for all different types of construction work. You want to go in and delete anything, you know, explosives or trenching operations not going to apply to you. So cut all that out. Make sure you put in your information for who to report to, and where your emergency meeting place or supplies are, so that it's very specific to your work. Number 9, no PPE while power tools are in use. So anytime your employees are exposed to falling, flying, abrasive, splashing objects, harmful dust, fumes, mist, vapors, or gases, they've got to have their PPE to protect them. So most often we see that they're using power tools and not wearing their safety glasses. And if they need that respirator or dust mask or something, that they don't have that available. So those are 2, we can see them from the road most of the time, highly visible. So make sure that your folks are wearing the PPE. And number 10, most common, hard hats not being worn or they're not readily available. So the code says that each employee must have an individual hard hat on site if there's overhead hazards, and they've got to be readily available at all times. So in the truck, you can have them, but almost always you're going to have somebody who's exposed to overhead hazards because they're down on the floor walking to their truck, or they're, you know, cleaning up debris or getting a tool or something, like this gentleman who's right underneath where they're throwing the debris down. That's an overhead hazard. They'd be cited for not having their hard hat. So I hope that answered the question in the chat. We got 2 more slides and then we can take any questions and hopefully cover that for you.
And we know that was a lot of information. There's a lot of information dense slides. So we want to go ahead and provide out how we can help you with some of that. With the insurance that you pay into L&I, it includes free consultation services where we can come out. We have safety, which will come out and inspect the stuff that we talked about in these slides, as well as other construction hazards, and we take a look at your safety programs, help you get those in place, and make any recommendations, offer advice if you need it. We also have industrial hygienist consultations. They would come out and look at more of your chemical hazards, if respirators were being used, or if the roofing had asbestos in the tiles. That would be something you would want an industrial hygienist to come out and take a look at if you're not familiar with that. So all the necessary steps are being taken when that process is being done, because the fines for that get really expensive. And then we have risk management and claims that can help reduce your insurance costs over time. And they take a look at your hiring policies, you know, where you're doing your hiring from, what your orientation consists of, your safety orientation and new employee orientation consists of, to help prevent accidents in the future and ensure you're hiring personnel that are also going to be committed to safety. The way that you can request an on-site consultation is through our website. The link will be in the PowerPoint. It'll bring you to this web page. But you can also, if you're on the western side of the state, which is where both Jessica and I serve, you can contact us directly. Our information will be Okay. And it will be on here on this slide. We have our cell phone numbers, our work cell phone numbers, and our emails. So if your business is based out of Pierce, Kitsap, Clallam, and Jefferson counties, then we can help you and you can contact us directly. Some additional resources I'd like to offer out is the overall rule where we're getting most of this information from on our slides. There's a link here. Again, here's another link for the APP, the construction one in specific, English and Spanish. Some more sample safety programs such as the outdoor heat exposure and the competent person evaluation. And we also have online training videos and a catalog search available. That concludes that part of the slideshow. If there is time later on, or if anybody wants to go over those resources for the fall protection, the unified fall protection handout or the e-tool, just let me know and I can walk you through that. It's pretty intuitive once you get through it, so it'll be easy to use after. And do we have any questions? Let's see.
There are 2 questions. Do you provide safety classes where upon completion we could receive a certification of completion?
Not at the time. So one of the things that would require us to be able to do that is to have our own certificate for training the trainers. And we do not have that at this time. We're working on getting that. So we do offer training, but it's more, it'll be documented, but as far as like a certification for competent person training, some of the ones where you would need those special certifications, we do not provide that.
We have another question. All the paperwork L&I requires on job sites, does a digital version work? That is a tremendous amount of paperwork throughout the year.
Yes, it can, as long as it's available for the inspector if we were to come out and we needed those documents and they were to be provided. If you can provide them on site, then yes, a digital version would work. But if you're not able to and you would have to email us later the documents, then that would not work.
I would add too that
Fall protection.
fall protection work plan's got to be there on site. And if you have some kind of issue with your digital device, if you're putting it on a tablet or something, are your folks going to be able to access that fall protection work plan? Are they going to be able to complete a walk around inspection and document their safety meetings so that when we stop by, we can say, yes, it has been done. So if you don't have a reliable system in place, I would say probably having something that you at least jot down in a notebook is a good way to keep track of that as well.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Louise and Jessica. You provided all the necessary information for our roofing communities. I look forward to receiving your PowerPoint, and we'll make sure that it gets on our website and gets out to the attendees today. Please remember on Tuesday, March 21st, our next Lunch and Learn, we'll have Rhonda Taylor with Stop Claims Corp. and Kristen Bigoff with Big Safety talking about labor and industry rights as a company manager, assistant, and owner. There's another Lunch and Learn you do not want to miss. We also have a sporting clays event coming up on April 14th. Come one, come all for a great day of shooting clays. Please register online at www.rcaw.com.